Okay, we'll start with this. Well, as previously reported, it does appear that the stories have checked out. Okollie Reis is going to be fighting for the newly vacated WBA title in the 140-pound division, and she's found a dance partner. That dance partner is Wyatt. Wyatt, who sports a professional record of 10 wins, 1 loss with 3 knockouts. That 1 loss coming at the hands of Greece's own Cristina Linardetu. And in that fight, Candy was downed 3 times in the 6th round, where she was subsequently taken out. Ahead of this fight, I'm fairly confident that she won't have much luck with Okollie Reis either. That really has less to do with Candy and more to do with Okollie. Okollie is the much naturally bigger girl. Okollie, who has campaigned as high as middleweight. Okollie, who sports a professional record of 16 wins, 7 losses, 1 draw with 5 knockouts. In this fight, Okollie is not only the much naturally bigger girl, the bigger puncher, but also the more experienced fighter. Don't read too much into those 7 losses. Okollie derived more experience from those 7 losses than Candy has overall throughout the entirety of her career. It's for this reason I favor Okollie to win the match and subsequently become the newly crowned WBA's 140-pound champion, effectively changing the landscape in the junior welterweight division. And if Okollie Reis wins this fight, that will give Brian Cohen 3 of the 4 world champions at 140 pounds. All are managed by Brian Cohen, the Empire stable of fighters. Moving forward, many of those fighters are likely going to end up doing business with Eddie Hearn, as Eddie Hearn's girl, Chantelle Cameron, has aspirations of unifying the division, becoming that division's undisputed champion.
And I'm hoping it's for unification. After my fight, Eddie Hearn tweeted straight into unifications for me. So I'm hoping that that's what I get, because obviously that's what I said, that's my dream. Winning the WBC was amazing, but that's not my dream. My dream is to be unified. So I feel like I've only just accomplished one thing. I still got a hell of a lot more to accomplish yet. And that I was saying to them the other day is the way people are talking and acting, it would be as if I've hit where I want to be. And I said, like, I've still got levels to go. There's still so many more levels. And I just achieved one step with it.
Though titles are changing hands at 140 pounds, for Chantelle Cameron, the goal in and of itself hasn't changed. She has every intention of becoming the next undisputed champion at this weight. And in order for that to happen, in order for Chantelle to achieve that dream, Eddie Hearn is going to have to do a lot of business with Brian Cohen moving forward, as Brian, in the near future, could have 3 of the 4 world champions at 140 pounds. He's already got 2. He's already got Mary McGee, the IBF champion, Cristina Linardetu, the WBO champion, and Okollie Reis could soon become the 3rd fighter of the Empire stable of fighters to be crowned a world champion at this weight. I'll tell you the truth. There were easier divisions to unify than this one, as every single one of these girls, Mary McGee, Cristina Linardetu, Okollie Reis, they're all formidable. They all bring something to the table. I mean, there really are easier divisions to unify than this one.
Yeah.
Out of these 3 fighters from the Empire stable of fighters, the most beatable under these circumstances would have to be Cristina Linardetu. I only say she's the most beatable because she, like Chantelle Cameron, isn't exactly a natural 140-pounder. Cristina moved up in weight, same way that Chantelle moved up in weight. Neither of the two have been around the pro game as long as either Mary McGee or Okollie Reis. So those 2 fighters, they've got a lot more experience in the pro game than Chantelle or Cristina. And that's really not a knock on Cristina. Cristina is a formidable fighter. She's got explosivity. She's got punching power. But if we're looking at these 3 fighters from the Empire stable of fighters, and we're asking ourselves which one of these 3 girls is the most beatable, I'd have to say it's Cristina. Keep in mind, this is relatively speaking. That doesn't mean that Cristina is an easy out. That means she's easier than someone else. It being that Eddie Hearn has already orchestrated a fight between Cristina and one of his fighters, the Katie Taylor fight, in the past, I think he's going to revisit Cristina first. I think he's going to revisit her as an option for one of his fighters and start the party off that way.
It's the devil that you know.
Those who follow Katie Taylor and follow Chantelle Cameron, those who want to see those two fighters lock horns, will recognize Christina as a common opponent between them.
If they shoot for her next.
Though she wouldn't be the first, as Chantelle and Katie have a few common opponents. Anais de Sanchez, Vivian Obanoff, and Karina Kapinska. If Chantelle ends up fighting Christina next, that would be the fourth common opponent between them, allowing the fight fans following this saga to cross-compare performances. Who did it better? And that lends itself to building that fight. For now, Okollie Reis is going to get her shot at the vacant WBA title, and Chantelle dealing with Okollie, having to, seems very much like an eventuality to me, as so long as she maintains that goal, that aspiration to become this division's undisputed champion, at some point she's going to end up having to deal with Okollie, because I do think Collie's going to beat Candy Wyatt. Fight's going down in St. Petersburg, Florida, on November the 7th, and it will be aired on the Impact Network.
Just about 2 weeks.
The landscape at 140 pounds is changing. It is changing on schedule, and I predict that Okollie Reis could be the next WBA champion at this weight. Keep your eyes peeled for that in about 2 weeks' time. Moving on. Per tweet from Michael Benson, Eddie Hearn has named 2 possible fights for the Anthony Joshua versus Kubrat Pulev card on December 12th. One is a cruiserweight WBO championship fight between Lawrence Okollie and Krzysztof Glowacki, and the other is a super middleweight contest, forget this, a WBA Mando spot between John Ryder and David Lemieux. Out of those 2 fights, if I'm being honest, even though the cruiserweight contest between Lawrence Okollie and Krzysztof Glowacki would be for a full-fledged title, I don't think the aesthetic of that fight is going to be particularly pleasing. Let's be honest with ourselves, and let's be honest with each other. Lawrence Okollie does not have a fan-friendly style. This is a very difficult guy to watch at times. He's got all this size, all this length, all this wingspan.
He's a big kid.
But he really doesn't use it. He insists on making most of his outings clinch fests, playing guys close to the chest when a fighter that has his physical dimensions really doesn't have to. Every time I watch this guy, I think to myself, he'd probably end these fights a lot earlier if he'd give himself a bit of space and maintain it to let go of some straight shots, some straight punches, because when he does throw straight punches, they seem to have good power on them. I know I might sound like a broken record, but when I think of these 2 potential undercard fights for Joshua versus Pulev, Okollie versus Glowacki, and Lemieux versus Ryder, I think that the Lemieux versus Ryder fight is likely going to be a more exciting and fun fight to watch, because Lawrence at times is a bit hard to stomach. He's a very frustrating guy to have to watch. In the case of Lemieux versus Ryder, David Lemieux is about 2 fights into his super middleweight campaign. He's on a 4-fight winning streak. He's won his last 4 fights, and 2 of those fights were super middleweight contests. I think by now, it's safe to say that David has outgrown the middleweight division, though whether or not he's fully acclimated to the super middleweight division and cut out the campaign there, that is quite another story.
Yeah.
That's a whole different kettle of fish. David won't have to cut down to 160 pounds anymore, but that doesn't exactly mean that he's in tip-top shape at this stage in his career. He had a rather lackluster showing against Max Burzak. Had to pick himself up off the canvas in that fight en route to a victory. That's not exactly encouraging. It's pretty clear that David Lemieux can't make 160 pounds healthy anymore, but that doesn't exactly make him solid at 168. Not when you're getting dropped by the likes of Max Burzak ahead of this John Ryder fight. I guess the silver lining, I guess the saving grace, is that John Ryder, formidable as he might be, isn't really one of the bigger guys on the bigger end of the spectrum as far as super middleweights go. He's a smaller guy than David Benavidez, smaller guy than Callum Smith. I think he's a couple of inches shorter than Billy Joe Saunders.
Yeah, John's not a big guy.
He's a solid guy, a stocky guy, but not statuesque.
No.
In that way, these guys are kinda eye level, and that has all the makings of a firefight. A firefight between these 2 guys who really are come-forward punchers.
Both of them.
If David Lemieux is anything, he's a puncher. He's a come-forward pressure fighter. But so is John Ryder. In that way, I think this is going to turn out to be a more exciting fight than Glowacki versus Okollie, even though in this fight, there's not a world title, a full-fledged world title on the line. This is for a Mando spot, a WBA Mando spot. And guess who holds the full-fledged WBA title? Callum Smith. For John Ryder, this would be an opportunity to force that guy into a rematch situation. For David Lemieux, this brings him one step closer to becoming a two-division champion. Though I reiterate, I question the often injured David Lemieux's durability at this stage in his career and at this weight, where he's dealing with naturally bigger guys that are accustomed to taking a naturally bigger punch. David's got a professional record of 45 wins, 35 knockouts, 4 losses. He's been stopped 2 times, only 2 times, in about 46 fights. So it's not a bad record, but at the same time, this is a guy who's often injured and has had 46 professional contests.
He debuted in 2007.
Been a pro boxer for about 13 years, roughly. To John Ryder, who's been around for about 10.
Debuted in 2000.
Professional record of 28 wins, 5 losses, 1 more loss on his record than David Lemieux, though it's questionable as to whether or not people actually consider that Callum Smith fight a loss.
Some don't.
You ask around, a lot of people don't. I feel like John Ryder might be the more solid fighter out of these 2 fighters, and even though he's coming off a loss, he's been looking better fight by fight than David. He's definitely got more fights at this weight than David. You know, since that loss to Jack Arnfield, which was a middleweight contest, John moved up and stayed up ever since, campaigning as a super middleweight, amassed a bit of a winning streak before quote-unquote losing to Callum Smith. So, I do think this is a good fight. I think it's going to be a fun fight to watch for however long it lasts. But I do view John as being slightly more durable than David. I think it's safe to say that. And finally, Wilder is ready to fight Fury in December, says training partner. This isn't from Wilder himself. It's from someone else, yet again. Okollie, who speaks to Wilder on a daily basis, says his close friend is fully prepared to face Fury on a date in December. He was quoted as saying, "I'm just saying, from Deontay's perspective, he is ready to go for December. I'm not involved in the politics or anything, but one thing I know from Deontay is he is ready to go in December. Deontay is expecting Wilder versus Fury in December. I'm just saying what Deontay is expecting," Okollie said to The Sun. He is expecting Wilder versus Fury in December. That's what he's been told, and that is what he is training for, and he's ready to go. Fury has a contract for a rematch, I believe, so he has to show up to the arena on that day. Deontay will show up to the arena on that day. That's what I can tell you. I have conversations with him once a week. To the best of my knowledge, he will be in that arena, wherever that fight takes place. He's in shape. We haven't sparred just yet. We just work out together. We do a lot of strength and conditioning work together because we share the same trainer. Obviously, he's an athlete. He's superhuman in his unique body type and the way he's carrying himself. Let me tell you something. There's nothing superhuman about the deafening silence of Deontay Wilder as of late. This is yet another one of his buddies, another one of his pals, offering up a word on his behalf. That as far as he knows, Wilder's training for the Fury fight, whereas the Fury people have been quite vocal the last couple of weeks that they're not fighting Wilder in December, they're moving on, and they're going to fight someone else in the United Kingdom. And his opponent options range from his top-ranked stablemates Caballel and Carlos Takam. But as far as the Wilder fight, the Fury people, as far as they're concerned, that third fight is kaput. Okollie, Wilder's buddy, he claims he's not involved in the quote-unquote politics, but in order to offer any real insights into this situation, he would have to be.
Yeah.
Because this is all about politics. This is all about contracts and term limits. So unless you're privy to that information, these anecdotes don't mean a hell of a lot. This is yet another one of Wilder's buddies offering up a word on his behalf. You know, Junior Fa talked about some injury that Wilder suffered to his bicep ahead of the Tyson Fury fight, and in truth, it wasn't the craziest thing I ever heard, but the more these guys that are buddies with Wilder step forward and try to speak for him, the more grave his situation appears to be, because Wilder really should be addressing this stuff himself, and he still hasn't. I mean, you got Tay Jones coming forward for the guy. You got Junior Fa coming forward for the guy. Okollie is coming forward for the guy. When Wilder's a grown man, he should be able to speak for himself. He should be able to address this stuff himself. If he feels any kind of way about Fury bailing on him, we'd never know it because he's not saying anything himself. And that silence, that deafening silence, is being interpreted by many as acquiescence, as a sigh of relief that he won't have to deal with Tyson Fury for a third time. Because if he wanted to, if revenge is what he was after, this uncharacteristic silence isn't what we would be seeing, but it very much is what we're seeing and what we have been seeing as of late. We're not seeing outrage from the Wilder people or Wilder himself that Tyson Fury's immediate plans for the immediate future don't immediately involve Deontay Wilder. We're not seeing or hearing much from the Wilder side of things. Anything we're hearing now is from the hired help, his sparring partners, his gym buddies.
But where's Wilder?
You know, it's been about a week since we last touched on this subject, and in a week's time, nothing has changed. It's pretty much the same tune from a different jukebox. Reassurances about the fight, reassurances about Wilder's condition, and in truth, all these reassurances actually do is convince me of the opposite, that maybe Wilder is in shape physically, but psychologically, he's not fit to fight. That's what I take away from it, that perhaps physically he's okay, but psychologically, upstairs, he might be irreparably damaged. The air of confidence that he once had has all but dissipated, and he's been brought back down to earth. And with the way that Wilder used to carry on, it's no surprise that for him, the fall from grace was that much more violent. Terminal velocity for his ego as it comes crashing down whilst Tyson Fury rained down blows upon him.
Beating a dead horse.
I mean, that's how I feel as I attempt to address this news, attempt to address these comments from Okollie, that there's nothing new to add here until Deontay Wilder comes out of hiding. There's nothing else to add to this conversation.